Hi everyone, a very good afternoon to all of you today and welcome to GovInsider Live ASEAN's Digital Day. My name is Rachel, I'm a reporter at GovInsider and I'll be your host for the next session, a just transition to a digitally enabled workforce. For those of you who are just joining us from earlier sessions, welcome back from lunch and I hope you guys enjoyed our series of webinars so far. So in this session specifically, we'll be deep diving into the digital talent gap. And ASEAN has one of the fastest growing digital economies in the world, with the internet economy being on track to account for more than 360 billion US dollars by 2025. Yet the region struggles with a shortage of an estimated 47 million people in tech talent by 2030, according to a 2022 Digital Talent Insight report. So more than 50% of APAC chief executives found it hard to hire digital talent with the right skills. And so the undercurrent of this digital talent gap is the inefficacies of the education sector that focuses on reskilling employees by a just-in-time model. Additionally, women's participation in the digital economy has been also found to lag behind, leaving men and larger corporations to dominate the industry. So this panel will explore ways in which the region can enhance the exchange of knowledge and adapt its education sector and find also new indicators to monitor ASEAN's digital economy in order to address the digital divide that we see very eminently coming towards us. And we also want to ensure that nobody gets left behind. So joining me on the panel today, we have Mr. Mark West, education specialist from UNESCO France, who is unfortunately unable to make it last minute. But also we have Associate Professor Justina Tan, Associate Vice President of Strategic Partnership and Engagement at Singapore University of Social Sciences. She was also previously heading the Institute for Advanced Learning at SUSS as well. And finally, we have Mr. Srijay Ghosh, founding member and Chief Revenue Officer of Temus Singapore. So welcome, speakers.
Hello.
Hi. And before we dive into the panel, I would like to remind everyone that you can ask any questions that you would like to either of them anytime throughout the panel by logging into slido.com and typing in the event code GILAD. That is slido.com, SLIDO.com, and type in the event code GILAD. All right, so let's begin. Okay, Srijay and Prof. Justina, very nice to have you guys here today with us. Firstly, maybe can each of you introduce yourselves and what do you do? Maybe Prof. Justina would like to go first.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. I'm Justina. I'm actually just assumed the position of Associate Vice President, Strategic Engagement and Partnership. I'm also actually heading the comms and marketing team in SUSS. Previously, I was actually heading the Learning and Professional Development Division in the Institute for Adult Learning in Singapore. And in my scope of work, I deal mostly with enterprises in terms of the solutioning for certain outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Justina. How about you, Srijay?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. I'm Srijay. I'm the founding member and Chief Revenue Officer at Temus. I'm seconded from Temasek, where I'm a managing director in its enterprise development unit, which drives initiatives to build future-forward companies in Singapore. So Temus was founded by Temasek in 2021 to catalyze digital transformation in both public and private sectors, and in a way to build the necessary digital capabilities and a strong digital talent pool anchored in Singapore. At Temus, I oversee all revenue-related engagements, ecosystem partnerships, as well as M&A for the firm. And just to give us a sense to everyone, Temus, as I said, founded in 2021, in 2 years have grown to about 250 people, 200 of them in Singapore, and really looking forward to growing at a fast pace over the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Srijay. It's very exciting to have the brains behind Temus join us today as well. So very excited to hear what you both have to share coming panel. So maybe for a start, we can seek to problematize first and understand really where the digital talent gap lies exactly here in Singapore as well as the region. So, Prof. Justina, how would you characterize the education and workforce landscape today in light of rapid digitalization?
Okay, maybe I would just start with the workforce first. I think actually, especially because of the pandemic, it actually accentuated the importance of digitalization as well as catching up with digitalization. There's a gap because we are playing the catching up rather than in front of the curve. If I were to say about the workforce today, I would say that it's highly disrupted, not only by digitalization, highlighted by pandemic, also being actually so-called underscored by the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing today. So I wouldn't say that it's just digitalization as a factor, the single factor that's affecting the workforce. Now, of course, for the workforce, right, we are seeing jobs disrupted and also new jobs created. Actually, it's nothing new. I think there's also two camps of two sides, meaning that one was saying that it's actually, it's coming, it involves something bad for the workforce because taking away of their jobs. Now, this is actually what we see in the workforce, especially for the manual and repeated work. This group of people are being affected, but we are also seeing new jobs created, so that there's new opportunities. Now, what does that mean for education? Now, as you are aware, education usually is front-loading. That means getting you prepared for a job for life. Now we are hearing a new mandate is that you actually learn to earn. Now it's no longer learning for a job for life, but now you're learning to earn. So there is a bit of a mindset shift. So again, education on our side is also trying to close the gap. Now, Rachel, you mentioned that there's a gap between what the workforce needed and what we have. Is indeed true because there are new skills that keep appearing, and education is trying to catch up, are trying to predict with fidelity the kind of jobs that we're preparing people for. So that's my take on this. Yeah.
Wow, thanks so much, Prof. Justina, for setting the scene so well. So I like what you said about us. Right now, the gap happening is because that we're behind the curve instead of kind of predicting and anticipating what the new jobs are going to be and how they're going to be addressed in the education sector. So how is SUSS or IAL currently approaching this current phenomenon?
Okay, so we are actually going for a two-pronged approach. The first prong is actually working very closely with industries to actually narrow the gap by actually pushing out bite-sized courses, short certification to get people not to be proficient, but to be competent. That means able to start the job rolling. The second prong that we're looking at is instead of just making sure people have the technical skills to be able to perform the technical sides of the digital competency, we are looking to actually upskill people in what we call the critical core skills. For example, problem solving, transdisciplinary thinking, and most importantly, learning to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because, right, since we are not, I don't think it's quite likely we'll be ahead of the curve. If we are always going to play catch up, then what is the next best solution? The next best solution is getting people ready to learn as quickly as possible the new skill set so that we are not too far behind the curve.
Wow, so insightful an answer. So you're teaching them how to fish rather than feeding the fish to them, right? As the old
Yes.
adage says. That's very,
Yeah.
very interesting. So how about you, Srijay? How do organizations like Temus help to close the gap as well by synergizing public and private sectors?
Yeah, I think Prof. Justina made some very good points. I want to come to the demand gap point before I come to how public and private sector can synergize. I think the 2 points made by Professor Catch-up and geopolitical are extremely relevant. There is one point on the demand side that we see that when you think about digital talent gap, there are two kinds of forces at play. One is, of course, the emergence of digital first companies. I think, Rachel, you mentioned in your intro, emerging in this region, particularly in consumer internet, fintech. And then You have legacy firms who are looking to transform as they face competition, as they want to preserve their position against these digital first companies. So the talent gap actually has compounded because these two worlds have collided, the digital first companies and the legacy firms to whom digital is existence right now. Actually, public sector, if you think about public sector also, Singapore has definitely led the way when it comes to healthcare, education, citizen engagement. But if you look at the broader region, there is a huge aspiration to make healthcare accessible, to make education adaptive, and to engage with the citizen more. And if you just look at public sector alone, there itself, there will be a lot of demand that is needed to actually make it happen. So I don't think demand has much constraints. The constraint clearly, like both of you pointed, is on the supply side, and the supply side has not been able to keep up with the demand. Now, traditionally, the supply side has been driven by STEM graduates, folks who graduate with a computer science degree, and we know that there are only so many degree programs, only so many seats within the four walls of a classroom in this region. So when we think about addressing the digital talent gap, we really have to think different. We really have to think different from what we have done for the last few decades. Now, both the public and private sector has launched various initiatives in this regard. Professor mentioned a few points with respect to SUSS. IMD has the TESA and the CLT program. Then in the private sector, specific companies have also launched their own reskilling programs. A lot of times these programs tend to be captive to their own needs. What is critically important is actually the initiatives that the public sector is doing and the initiatives that the private sector is doing to form a bridge that actually brings the funnel and the funding and the resources of the public sector to the private sector demand and the training and the reskilling that the private sector provides, which remains captive to companies but can be more broad-based. And that was truly the philosophy when Temus looked at this problem. As I said, we went from 0 to 250 in 2 years, and we had to really think about talent differently, because if you look at the traditional talent pools, it's a red ocean. There are a handful of companies hiring the same people every 1.5 years, and they move. So when we think about creating new talent, the philosophy of the Step It Up program that Temus launched was to look at people with non-traditional backgrounds, people who had no background in tech, to give them 4 months of boot camp. These are literally boot camps that run from day to night, including weekends, to train them on specific skills, and then give them an on-the-job training, which is directly tied to what they learn and guarantees a place in Temus with a full-time position. So the model that we are doing is that we look at the demand first, and we see what is needed in the market, what is needed by the clients of Temus, and we use that as a data point to reverse engineer the curriculum, the admissions process, and really make it happen. Now, on the funnel, on the supply side, we work closely with the public sector to tap into various forms of talent pools. Folks who are graduating from polys, ITs, folks who are alumni of these institutions and are mid-careers looking for a change in digital. So we have a strong collaboration with the public sector on getting the right people. Now, we collaborate with the private sector, which is our clients, to find what do they need to learn so that they can be immediately placed after they go through the training program. So that's really how we take the strengths of both the public sector and private sector, bridge them, and see how we can truly transform talent.
Thank you, Srijay. I really like how you approached the question from sort of a different perspective. Like since we covered the supply side issues with Prof. Justina, you touched on what the issues are with the demand side. That different kinds of legacy firms versus digital firms, how their challenges are slightly different, and how converging them also creates a different set of problems and new challenges. So very excited to hear more about the Step It Up program, which is kind of the reason why we are having this discussion today with you here with us. So actually, I do have one follow-up question at this point for the both of you. Could you help me elaborate a little bit more about what the industries themselves face with hiring digital talent from your communications with them? What are the main challenges that industry players are facing today when it comes to the digital talent gap?
Srijay, you want to go first, or you want? If not, I'll go
Right.
first. Okay. I actually wanted to mention something that when we talk about digital talent, right? The assumption here, or rather, the audience that we're looking at, it seems to be coming from the same basket. But I just want to actually make mention that the workers or the employees fall along a spectrum from what we call the semi-skilled to the highly skilled, right? And when we talk about this digital talent, actually one of the questions, right, that we need to ponder over is in which of this spectrum does this digital talent actually is glaringly lacking? Okay, and I will answer Rachel's questions in the context of what I've just painted. Now, different industry will face different challenges, not only in accordance to the nature of the business, but also the types of employees and workers they have. In fact, right, the digital or the digitalization affects this spectrum very differently. The most affected are not the highly skilled workers. This is the group. I give an example. Industries such as F&B, waiters and waitresses, or especially the elderly, right, that have to do some kind of like financial transaction. I give an example. Now no longer cash exchange hands, but they have to perform like faith pay. So the industry find it actually for the F&B, for example, when we deal with them, they find it very hard to get these elderly workers to actually to learn to digitalize the way they perform their functions, because the resistance and the fear is very real. Okay. Now then we have a second group of employees. Now this could actually be the clerical or with the organization for a long time. We are seeing a number of requests from organizations with quite a big proportions of employees of this category. So they are able to perform their job well, but they are performing jobs that automation or digitalization can replace them. So obviously, so for example, if the company says that we are going to send you for some kind of courses or to upskill you in this area, now the first thought that came to their mind was, are we going to be replaced? Are we going to be replaced? And of course, the company had to assure them, no, we are going to let you do more value add work. Okay, but it's still words, it's still not reality yet. So of course, they will venture into it with some kind of apprehension. And in my opinion, when we deal with companies with the highly skilled workers, they're the most embracing because they see the advantages. I don't think anybody can discredit the benefits that comes with digitalizations, but the impact on the individual will kind of tweak their response to how they are actually being impacted by that. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
No, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Srijay.
Yeah, I would just add to what Professor just said, which is, when you look at talent, you acquire, I would say there is organic talent and inorganic talent. Organic talent is what exactly Professor is alluding to, which is talent that exists within the firm. And how do you transform them? And that itself is a big challenge. I think another example I'll give you is banks and retail banks having retail branches and bank tellers. As we think about digital bank, there's an entire transformation that is going to happen. So I think a lot of the challenges here is what do you do with the talent that you have, and how do you quickly decide who can transform digital or who can actually rescale and move into a job that is more digital native than what it is today. There's a lot of research going on in this area, right? In terms of, how do you test somebody's intent and motivation? I'll talk a little bit, I'll step it up later on this regard. The second, the second point I want to add is what is actually a good tailwind is that the silos between industries are blurring. Now, if you think about, take the example of Grab, right? Is it a transportation company? Is it a, tech company? So I'm just saying that because the lines between different industries are blurring, what that also means that capabilities are ending up being more horizontal as being siloed. A classic example is ChatGPT. As a technology, it is very horizontal. And anybody who acquires capabilities to take that ChatGPT and move it into enterprise GPT can be applied in various sectors. So again, I think you will increasingly see that as the silos between industries blur and as capabilities become more horizontal, this also creates a much larger playing ground for people to be more bold on learning some of these capabilities, because they know that there will be application of that across multiple sectors and industries.
Thank you to the both of you. I think what I'm hearing is that we are starting to delve into the nitty-gritty of where the gap really lies, and how it affects different groups of people very, very differently, actually, even though the overarching issue is still the same. I particularly like acknowledging Prof. Justina when she's acknowledging the emotional aspect of this issue, and how it will kind of affect the tone of this issue when we communicate it to all the different groups of stakeholders. So I think right now it's a good transition into the next subsection of our discussion, which is addressing the inequalities, right, within the gap itself. So Srijay, I would like to delve deeper into you with the Step It Up program. We have heard that chefs, tutors, Grab drivers have been able to enter the digital workforce through the Step It Up program. And what we're seeing here is really targeting the people who, in a way, are the most vulnerable to the gap right now, right? So could you speak more to the program's selection process and how it seeks to be sort of completely unbiased and inclusive to those of any gender, income level, or professional or academic backgrounds?
Yeah, happy to do that. Like you said, we had some very, very interesting people from very interesting backgrounds coming into the Step It Up program. But I can tell you there's one thing in common between them, which is their motivation to learn. And all these guys, it's quite fascinating, because when we spoke to them, they're actually subscribed to various coding courses, that are available online. But when they wanted to actually look for a job, they were asked, hey, you don't have the experience, you don't have a computer science degree. So all these guys, it's not that they didn't try, they tried, but they were just not able to break into the industry. And that was, again, coming to the design, that's why we really wanted to, target this segment. No tech background, but very high on motivation. And I'll talk a little bit about how we select them, right? So in two steps, I would say. One is, of course, checking the aptitude. And there are two kinds of aptitudes we check. One is the IQ, which is more analytical skills. This is very much like a SAT kind of test. And then the second one is more EQ, I would say, which is more a psychometric test, which kind of goes into the emotional part of it. The second thing that we also check is what I said earlier: intent and motivation. And the way we do it is twofold. One is really have a one-on-one discussion with them about what truly motivates them to come for that interview in the first place. The second thing is also we have a roundtable where we have multiple candidates show up and discuss and talk about a topic, right? Use of tech in healthcare, for instance, very open-ended topic. And there you can really see the guys who are passionate about the topic. It's not so much about their knowledge on tech, because you don't expect them to know, but really how they approach the discussion. So we use all these methods to kind of ultimately pick people who are analytically strong. You need that to learn coding, but people who are equally motivated to actually transform themselves. The way we run the program is, of course, you have an instructor, but you also have a coach. And the role of the coach is quite interesting. The coach is like a life skill supporter. So effectively, because it's, as I say, it's literally a boot camp where 9 to 6, you are trying to consume, then you're staying late, then you're coming on weekends. Some people can really get stressed out, and that's where the coach comes in and puts a hand around the person's shoulder and really helps them motivate and support. So that element of motivation is constantly there as they go through a very rigorous curriculum. Our first run, was in .NET. The program was launched last year, and we had a full batch of successful candidates who graduated in, I believe, February or March this year. 85% of that cohort were career switchers, as in they were not, they had absolutely no clue about tech or did anything related to tech. Half of the class were in their 20s, half of the class were in their 30s. So you can see there's a lot of diversity between younger folks and folks who are mid-career. And about 2 in 3 came from arts, arts, education, healthcare, commerce backgrounds, which is like non-STEM, so to speak. And once these guys went through the boot camp, all of them were placed in live engagements with various clients. They learned coding, they learned .NET, but I can tell you today, they're working across multiple areas. Some guys are actually doing coding. Some guys are playing business analyst roles. Some guys are playing data analyst roles. It's quite interesting because they learned .NET, but then they quickly were able to pivot into what the client needed and where the demand was. And the reason is simple. One is because of the fundamental factor that drives success here, motivation and learning agility. These guys are extremely agile in the way they learn, and that's how we screen them. And the second thing is, this principles of holistic learning, because tech to us is only an enabler to transform. But then there can be multiple things that you can learn in that tech toolbox. And we want these guys to be like that, right? To get different experiences. Ultimately, it is not the tech you learn, but what you do with the tech and actually the transformation that you drive. It's quite interesting because we had three guys in the class who got the top awards. I mean, we had these top of class awards. One lady was a freelance editor before she came into the Step It Up program. One guy was an optometrist before he came into the program. So you can imagine these guys coming in and really topping the class. So it was quite humbling to see that. So our second class is live now, is on low code. And I can tell you that with the success of the first batch, the second batch turned out to be even more diverse. I was telling 2 in 3 were from non-STEM like arts and commerce and healthcare backgrounds. That number is like 75 to 80%. Rachel, you talked about diversity and women in tech. In our first cohort, I believe about 25% were women. In this cohort, about 35-40% is women. So we're very, very happy to see the diversity grow as we run this program. And of course, word of mouth plays a very important role. Maybe one last point, sorry, it's a long answer, but one last point I would say is that I think over time, as we run this program more and more, I think we can get much more precise on predicting the success of people who, when they go through the program, succeed. Today we have to reach out to like 500-600 folks to get to a batch of 25, 30. I think over time, as we collect more data, and we really want to use that to see how we can be even more sharper, right? You just reach out to maybe 100, 150 people, and through that, you're able to get a cohort with those characteristics of motivation, learning, agility, and guys who really want to transform themselves.
Perfect, Srijay. So what I'm hearing from about the Step It Up program is that what you're really looking for is an attitude to learn and adapt along with society. And it's very nice that Temus has created sort of this very unique door for people to take up an opportunity if they see it come their way. And that's very inspiring. So actually, I also wanted to ask Prof. Justina about, these what going back to the emotional part of what you mentioned, some people are experiencing that resistance, fear, or perhaps apprehension when it comes to new technologies because they feel threatened by things like ChatGPT or other kinds of AI that could replace them. What do we do when these people may not necessarily be at the point where they want to jump on board this digital talent gap and digital talent bandwagon yet, right? What do we do for these people then?
Okay, so maybe I will also actually dissect your question into two parts. I just wanted to actually clarify that it is not just people who might be affected or who resist or fear. Even though who are willing to do that, there is this emotional energy engagement being drained to some aspect because there's uncertainty. Because what I'm hearing from Srijay is quite a self-selected group of people, motivated. It's a subset of the actual group that is being affected. So that's one thing. Maybe I will use one example to actually answer Rachel's question. And this is actually an authentic enterprise example. This is a company that will work with using robots to clean public places, robots. And the group of people that's most affected, as I mentioned, in along the spectrum, are the cleaners. Okay. Initially, these cleaners were very resistant about working with the robots. Now we're talking about augmentation. That means the jobs complement. We're not taking away the cleaner's job, right? So even then, when actually what the company did was that when they first introduced the robots to work together with the cleaners, they were resistant. They didn't want to work with it. Now, and very interestingly, because the workers did not actually also give their feedback by working with the robots were not configured to do their jobs as well as what the company would expect them to do. Now, to actually overcome this fear, okay, so what this company did with these people is that they engage, is a change management. And then we're talking about change management process. So they engage these cleaners to give feedback. These are all the Mandarin speaking, a lot of Mandarin speaking and dialect speaking kind of cleaners to actually kind of configure the robots. And what this company did was that they gave a lot of support. It means in terms of supervisory, working the workers through the entire process, praising them, and slowly they overcome that fear and now they work beautifully with the robots. It takes time. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that there's no panacea like a one-time and says that let's not be afraid and let's face it, because we are dealing with human beings here whose fear we need to acknowledge, recognize, as well as addressed, to move things forward. So this is something that I can mention, what we are doing in the authentic examples. Actually, I also wanted to say something in response to what Srijay was mentioning. Because I was thinking that as he was sharing, it's quite interesting because besides being a self-selected group of individuals, I think he brought up one point, which I'm going to link to what you mentioned about the emotional aspect of it, which is the applied practice part of this thing here. We are fearful because we just hear the abstract, the construct in itself. But unless we are in the thick of implementing or applying, which also goes back to the point why we have a gap. I don't think there is a lack of people or individuals interested to look into the digital aspect. They could go into Coursera or whatever, the kind of online learning. I myself am one of them. But the question is, after what I've learned, I don't have an opportunity to apply. So what I have knowledge, but I don't have the skills, which goes back to the point that digital could be about digital fitness in terms of competence, in terms of skills-based hiring that we're looking at. We're no longer looking at knowledge. So while I might parade a certificate of digital or in terms of analytics, but if I don't actually practice, I don't have the experience, I'm still fearful, of actually taking up the job, to be very honest in that sense. So knowledge doesn't actually take away my fear. My fear still stays until I'm actually, in the act of working on it and with it. Yeah.
So interesting, the difference between knowledge and skills and how we can sort of help to navigate that a little bit alongside these people when we are bringing them on board this digitalization train. So actually on the point of skilling, right? I think we want to revisit this subtopic that Prof. Justina also mentioned, about reskilling, relearning, and how you guys conduct micro learning sessions this day and age. And I think Srijay also mentioned in his Step It Up program that it's really about a 4-month accelerated program that seeks to really quickly integrate the participants into the workforce as fast as possible. So Prof. Justina, how would you how can education institutions like SUSS better tailor their offerings to support working professionals through micro learning, and what are maybe even some of the drawbacks to that when we are transitioning into a new education model or system?
Okay, so maybe I just want to maybe highlight why we have this thing called the micro credentials or micro learning, or some of them term it the nano learning, right? Bite-sized learning. The reason is because of barriers to learning, as well as how adults learn. Barriers to learning because of physical distance, because of the lack of time, because of other competing personal demands that make people not willing to probably invest certain times because there's an opportunity cost involved. And more importantly is the immediate gratification of learning. When I learn, what does it translate into? Something that is very tangible, economic gains in itself, or what does it translate to? So there's a delayed gratification when it comes to learning. Now, the other thing is also adult learning, because adults like to have autonomy about what they want to learn, how they want to learn, when they want to learn. So that is why micro learning or nano learning actually sits well with these adults, right? So just in time kind of learning. That is why a lot of higher educations are going into this micro learning, and as well bundled with face-to-face kind of applied practice. Now, so this is something why it kinds of like popular in terms of micro learning. Now, it's good and bad. Good as like, because as I mentioned, even if you forget, it's not cognitive taxing. Just like how I want to make a cake, for example, I don't have to memorize the recipe, right? I just need to refer to these notes again or the micro learning bits, and then I start making a cake. So certain jobs, for example, how to do certain things, I can just always refer to the app. So for example, recently, actually not long ago, I was talking to this company, and they were trying to come up with apps for their handyman. So they're saying that, okay, because handymans, they face different issues, different problems, they could sometimes refer to the apps to just, refresh on how they're supposed to do certain things. Certain jobs lend itself to such kind of a learning. Now, but then I will want to link back to what I mentioned earlier on. But these are still bite-sized nano learning. If I were to look at the Bloom's taxonomy of learning outcomes, they rest on understanding, comprehension, recall, right? They don't really lend themselves to the platform of application, evaluation, synthesis, which is the higher cognitive order. That is probably actually is what probably the digital talent, the gap, is probably looking for. rather than just the more basic digital competence. So these are the pros and cons. So I would say that the nano or the micro learning give itself a very good landing for understanding of the fundamentals of the basic, but we need something more to add on, whether it's integrated into the workplace learning or whether it's a work-based learning or apprenticeship, whatever is the case, but there needs to be an opportunity for people to apply what they learn.
Thank you, Prof. Justina. The points on gratification and autonomy and time, these are so interesting to analyze and see how it's different from childhood learning versus adult learning. But it actually sounds to me like adults are more impatient and more stubborn in their learning style. Just kidding. But actually, so Srijay, maybe you would love to weigh in here because Step It Up's program is very focused on the application part that Prof. Justina mentioned, right? Following the education, what happens after and how do we retain this talent and ensure longevity after these programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to start with the demand, and then you line up the supply. Where you see issues is when the supply lines up first, guessing the demand. I think that's why your first question to me, how can public and private sector work together? That is core to making this a success. That is core to transforming talent. And that's what we are trying to do in Step It Up, which is really start from the demand. And then everything is designed to make sure success, where success is not somebody taking a course, but success is somebody actually doing the job after taking the course.
Thank you, Srijay. So I guess at the final part of our discussion, and at this point, I would also like to encourage our audience to ask questions if you have any that come to mind on slido.com and you type in the event code GILAD. So we'll be looking forward to answering questions. Otherwise, I do have a lot of questions, no worries for the both of you. So yeah, so on this point, Srijay, I would like to ask, how programs like Step It Up can be sort of scaled up in the future to address the wider digital talent gap in Singapore and beyond, and think about also how we can rethink the way we measure success of these programs, right?
Yeah.
Like what are the KPIs and how do we know that we've done a good job bridging this gap?
We think about scaling quite deeply. Looking at the success of the first and the second program, of course, the first two programs that Step It Up had was for Temus's own hiring. At least as far as Step It Up is concerned, one dimension of scaling is doing it for clients. So, which means that, let's say, if there is a company A with a specific need, then we work with them to reverse engineer and ultimately place them in the company. And we take all accountability and responsibility to train and actually, get them through the on-the-job training with the client before they're placed. But at a macro level, scaling, I would say broadly three attributes to scaling. Number one, we talked about this, which is how do you widen the funnel smartly? And I'm particularly in Step It Up very interested how we can use data to learn and predict success. This means outreach can be effective and targeted, and this will really help. Of the limited resources that we have to run programs like this, it can be the return on that would be much higher if we can be effective in targeting the funnel properly. And there is science to it, and there's a lot of research going on. And I think through Step It Up in Singapore, we learn a lot, which will not only help scaling in Singapore, but also in the wider region. The second thing you alluded to, Rachel, which is defining the KPIs. The question is success defined by the number of folks who actually switches careers into digital from non-tech, non-digital backgrounds, or is success the number of hours or credits of training taken? And that's a very key distinction. In Step It Up, there's only one KPI, which is we measure success by the number of people who actually get placed in the job. And in our first run, it was 95%. Many public and private sector initiatives measure success by training. I've worked in various private sector companies over my last 20 years of working, and I can tell you my personal experience is a lot of people have learning hours every year, and they take, but they don't necessarily come back and apply or do something different based on what they learn. And truly, it comes back to that plan. How do you apply it? How do you force that application? And you pick the people who are actually willing to change. So that is number two, which is need to be very clear of the KPI. The KPI is people joining the digital workforce and increasing that pie. Training and everything else is a means to that, and engineer everything else to make that happen. I would say the third thing is taking risks. In private sector, any business takes risks, right? When you enter into a new market or you launch a new product, you make some investments and you take risks. Talent is no different, right? So I think people have to take risks. People have to invest to design curriculums like this. People should be aware that there'll be risks that some of these guys who actually go into the job may not make it, but the guys who make it is very differentiated talent, which is very rational from a cost standpoint. Typically, data has shown very high on retention, and last but not the least, a pretty high societal impact. So all this, if you think, and if you put that as a new talent strategy, people have to take risks, people have to make investments, and people have to give time for this diversity of talent to come and solve this problem that we have today.
Wonderful, Srijay. Prof. Justina, would you like to also weigh in on this from an educational standpoint? How do educational institutions like SUSS seek to ensure that digital skills training and other workforce development initiatives lead to sustainable long-term careers for workers in ASEAN?
Yeah, I think I want to actually add a couple of points. I think the first point is that when we work with industry, I think the most important person or people is actually at the C-suite level. So usually we work with the bosses or the decision makers in that sense. Now, because the sustainability and accountability, usually I wouldn't say rest at their level, but people are looking to them, the kind of messages they're sending. Right. While you can say that I send my people for digitalization and things like that, or for courses and things like that, but if after the course, in the day-to-day, and if these C-suite people do not actually walk the talk and still do things the usual way, then the entire initiative will flop. It doesn't matter how strong the collaboration is. I think I want to highlight this. Second thing, I think the sustainability is not just a one-off kind of occasion or telling people that I'm going to send you for courses, upskilling or reskilling. I think putting in the infrastructure and more importantly, cultivating a culture of tolerance for failure or risk-taking, I think should be there. Because because this is something also could be a new field, right? And there's definitely not going to be a smooth journey. There's going to be bumps along the way, right? So if people think that if I try this, if I fail, would a company be forgiving towards me? So I think that it should be a mixed bag of factors and not just saying that it's not a linear journey, of this happened, this will happen, and that will follow. It doesn't happen this way. To me, I see this as a circular system. Right? It's a circular system because there must be a mesh of factors that I mentioned, which a lot of time people don't take that into consideration. They just assume if I send you for a course, you will do well for my company. So I just would like to respond to that.
Thank you, Prof. Justina. Yeah, the importance of quality top-down management and the need for making space for tolerance, failure, and risk-taking as a future kind of soft step to making the digital talent gap smaller. So I think I would like to leave our audience with one final question and answer for the both of you. What do you envision the future of education and workforce to look like? within the next maybe 2 decades, okay, by 2040, what will it look like to you? What's the utopia state and where do the possibilities lie? Perhaps Srijay, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think, you asked two questions. One is in the context of education, Professor mentioned bite-sized. I'm a big believer in that. And you mentioned just in time when you introduced this topic. I think just in time, bite-sized, um, hopefully is a lot more prevalent than the linear way in which I guess all of us have have learned. Right, you get a degree and then you take a bunch of courses. For me, 90% of them I never applied. So it shouldn't be like that, right? So you need to, based on what you are doing, um, you learn what is relevant. But then you create learning agility that helps you continuously unlearn and learn, unlearn and learn as the world changes. So I hope and I really feel that hopefully education systems, how people learn, evolve with how the world is changing. Now, as far as employment and workforce is concerned, I think I go back to what I mentioned, which is I think the silos between industries will blur. It will be much more horizontal capability driven, which can be applied across. Of course, there'll be a lot of focus on data and AI. I do believe that we are pretty much at the starting point of an AI revolution, and the possibilities from here. Also, the risks are quite apparent, and I believe the next 2 decades there'll be a lot of innovations, a lot of blunders, but ultimately they will all come together to make things more efficient and for humans to focus on higher value work. And that's truly, I think, the essence of AI and data and what it can do to all of us.
That would indeed be the utopia state, a world in which we can focus on the things we really can do and want to do, and everybody reaches their maximum potential with the help of technology. So thank you, Srijay, for that. Finally, Prof. Justina.
Okay, I want to approach this question from a sociological angle. Why do I say this? I think we should ask, what is education for? And of course, at the individual level, is to fulfill our potential. But education has a societal dimension. It has a societal dimension, right? So if you look at it from the sociological angle, sometimes education is to sort people into the different occupations. Okay, so there is a responsibility of education to answer to both dimension, or could be more dimension. I'm just highlighting two. Now, if I were to answer your question, I will look at education from the child all the way to an adult, right? I wouldn't just look at the adult education. I think regardless of what is going to happen in the future, a strong cognitive skills foundation is important. That is why the K1 to 12 education is very important, to build the base for people to think, to learn, and so on and so forth. Actually, essentially is to develop the habits of lifelong learning, right? And also develop the habits of thinking. So I would still say that whether the utopia state of education, whatever that costs, I think a strong cognitive foundation is still important. Now, then as we actually proceed further or progress further, now then we're looking at the adult education. So I think that there'll be multiple pathways. There will be a redefinition of what success is. I'm not sure about your generation. I know that in my generation, my parents wanted us to be like a doctor, a lawyer, because these are the professions that have the prestige, earn you money, and so on and so forth. And that's how they define success. But in the long run, success is no longer defined as such because we're going to change jobs, right? There's a potential that we keep changing jobs and things like that. And the ability to actually respond to this, I think the multiple pathway and maybe the modalities of learning might change. I don't know what is the utopia, but I think the utopia could be different pathway in terms of the provision for us to be able to change job. And of course, last but not least, right, I think I have to mention lifelong learning, which is also a vision of my university, which I believe this is utopian. What is utopian? Utopian maybe from the societal point of view, you're able to fill up the position. But a utopian from the individual point of view is really learning for life, and you getting to the end of the whole thing without, it's not a destination, it's always a journey of learning. Yeah.
That is honestly so beautiful, Prof. Justina. I really like how you are sort of helping us redefine success in the new generation. And yes, I think our parents are in this generation and decided to chill a bit and let us explore other career pathways and let us make career changes and normalizing career changes moving forward. So that's very exciting for future generations. So I think with that, I would like to draw the panel to an end. Thank you so much to Prof. Justina and Srijay for sharing all your wonderful insights, and I hope all of you tuning in have enjoyed the speakers' insights as much as I have. If any of you have any questions for either of them on the Step It Up program or what SUSS does to enhance lifelong learning, I'm sure they'll be happy to follow up with you if you reach out to them. So before we conclude our panel, I'd also like to remind everyone to complete our feedback survey, which we'll be sending across at the end of today's email. End of today via email. And if you like what you see so far today, do also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and on our Telegram channel to never miss a bit on public sector news. So you can follow us at GovInsider. That's our handle across all social media. And finally, to watch our next session on the potentials and pathways of super apps, do click the next session on our website. And we'll see you there at 2:30 p.m. Thank you everyone once again, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.